All right, it's Wednesday here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's the middle of the week, and we are here for another Morning Pitt to bring you up to date on everything going on in the world of Pitt sports, or at least some specific topics, the ones we choose to talk about on any given day, any given Wednesday, as the case may be. Make sure you like this video while you're here. Click the like button. It's down there. I never really know if I'm pointing in the right direction, but I mean, you can look below the video. You see a little thumbs up that YouTube puts there for you. Click that thing. And then click the subscribe button as well. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I saw something the other day that like 40% of the people who watch these videos are subscribed. That means it's like 60% of the people watching the videos are not subscribed to our YouTube channel. I have questions about what all those people who are subscribed and are not watching the videos, what they're doing. But if you're watching the video and you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button. You can always... to stay up to date on everything we do here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We posted, Pat Narduzzi's post-practice press conference yesterday. We posted video from practice yesterday. We'll post more today. All kinds of things in these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We post a new one every day. You don't want to miss it, so make sure you subscribe. And you can turn on notifications so you get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live. And, of course, we will be live tonight at 8:30 p.m. for the live stream, the live Panther-Lair show. We do it every week. And we'll have plenty of basketball, football, and recruiting to talk about on the live show tonight. So make sure you tune in for that 8:30 p.m. right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And the fun thing about that, what I always say is right over here, there's a chat screen. So every day, Monday through Friday, you watch this Morning Pitt video. And I say something, maybe something stupid, and you say, you idiot, that's not it, or I disagree, or I agree, or I have a question, or I have a comment, or whatever it is. Well, the live stream gives you a chance to do that. It's like a back and forth. It's like a call-in show. This in the morning is just a talk show. I just talk to you every day for 15 or 20 minutes. The live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 is more of it's almost like a call-in show. We can't hear your voice, but we can get your comments and your questions. And if you want me to use a funny voice when I'm reading your comment or your question to make the live stream a little more entertaining, I can do that as well. But it's a good time. We have a good back and forth. We did a lot of post-game shows. We did one after every postseason game this year, and we had a lot of fun with it. And we have a lot of fun on the Wednesday night live streams. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun tonight. So tune in 8:30 p.m. tonight at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And obviously, we've been all basketball all the time for the last weeks, months, who knows how long. Certainly, I mean, we've had plenty of hoops to talk about. And whether it was, in the middle of it all, game previews, game recaps, or big picture topics to discuss, or earlier this week, Monday, we kind of recapped the Xavier loss and talked about the season as a whole. Yesterday, we talked about what Jeff Capel needs to do this offseason and the player he needs to go after and that kind of thing. We've covered a lot of hoop stuff. We'll continue covering a lot of hoop stuff because Jeff Capel and his staff are going to be very active in the transfer portal, for sure. I mean, we know that's going to be the case. They're going to have a handful of spots, what do we count up yesterday? At least 3 spots to use on transfers or late blooming high school kids or something. Although I think probably the focus will be on transfers. They'll have at least 3 spots to fill up there. And so we'll have plenty to talk about on the basketball front going forward. But in the midst of all this hoop stuff happening over the last couple of weeks, there's been some recruiting stuff on the football side that we need to talk about as well. So we'll take a little break from the basketball to get into some football recruiting here on today's Morning Pitt, because in the time that Pitt was in the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament, really actually the NCAA tournament exclusively, Pat Narduzzi and his staff added 2 more commitments to the recruiting class of 2024. Last week, they got Francis Brew, a defensive tackle from Worthington, Ohio. I was trying to debate on how to go about this. We, build big picture down to each guy individually, but I figured we'll just name each guy and then talk about those guys and talk about the class as a whole as it stands. And so the first one was Francis Brew. And maybe that's the first question I can answer for you. His last name is spelled Brewu. How do you pronounce it? The U is silent. So it's Francis Brew. He's a defensive tackle from Worthington, Ohio. And then earlier this week, or actually on Saturday, and it got announced yesterday, Eric Ingwerson, a tight end from Nebraska. of all places. I don't know the last time Pitt got someone from Nebraska, but he's a 6'7" tight end, visited on Saturday, got an offer on Saturday, and committed on Saturday. He committed that day, but finally announced it yesterday, and so that was sort of the impetus to talk about this now. I wanted to talk about Francis Brew committing, but I knew there was that second commitment out there, so I figured we would wait until he made his announcement. Fortunately for us, Eric Ingwerson did, and now we can talk about him as well. So 6 commitments total, 2 new names added to the list, and really a pretty hot start for Pat Narduzzi and his staff on this 2024 recruiting class so far. 6 commitments in, team recruiting rank of 18. It's the number 18 recruiting class in the country right now. It's very early, so we kind of couch that, we make sure that's understood. Volume, getting a lot of guys early can help quite a bit. Now, it also helps that 2 of the 6 commitments are 4-star prospects. Jasir Whittington, the defensive tackle from Philadelphia, and Dede Farmer, the wide receiver from Florida. We'll get to those guys in a second, but Francis Brew is really intriguing to me. He took his first visit to Pitt in January, got his offer that day, and from then he sort of popped up on the radar, and we kind of looked into him and saw a guy that sounds pretty familiar. Stop me if you've heard this before. It's a defensive tackle who's about 6'1", 270, 275, and a playmaker, from the defense, a 3-technique defensive tackle playmaker who gets into the backfield and sacks and tackles for loss. Does that sound a little bit familiar? Yeah, Pitt's had a few of those guys. And actually their history with those smaller defensive tackles was a big part of why Brew committed to the Panthers last week. Like I say, he got his offer in January and was really impressed with Pitt at that point. Came back for a visit to their first spring practice last Tuesday, first day of spring camp. Came back, visited camp, sat down with Charlie Partridge, sat in the defensive line meetings, watched the coaches work in practice, watched the linemen work with Charlie Partridge in that spring practice, and came away saying, you know what, I want to be a part of this. Huge credit to Charlie Partridge on this land. Brew cited Partridge as his main reason for committing. It was his interactions with Partridge and his thoughts on Partridge being maybe the best defensive line coach in the country. Maybe there's no maybe about it. And then also Pitt's history with sort of smaller defensive tackles. And it's such a lineage. I mean, it really is of, Kalijah Cansey's the most recent guy, but Jalen Twyman before him and Aaron Donald before him and Mick Williams before him. I mean, these playmaking defensive tackles who pile up the sacks and get a lot of national recognition as a result. And even though Aaron Donald wasn't coached by anybody on this current coaching staff, I'm not sure. I mean, Aaron Donald was in the class of 2010. Charlie Partridge's last season at Pitt, his first time around was 2007. So Aaron Donald graduated in 2010. His senior football season was the fall of 2009. So Aaron Donald was probably a sophomore in the fall of 2007. So Charlie Partridge was probably aware of Aaron Donald, but he didn't coach Aaron Donald. Nobody on this staff coached Aaron Donald. He was a Dave Wanstead for 1 year player, a Todd Graham for 1 year player, and a Paul Christ for 2 year player. So Inoki Brechterfield and Paul Randolph and Greg Gattuso were the defensive line coaches that Aaron Donald knew at Pitt, but it's still associated. Aaron Donald is still associated with Pitt, and then fortunately for the Panthers, I think they've been able to reinforce that and maybe make Aaron Donald even more of a, or I should say fortunately for the Pitt coaches, they've been able to, I think, make Aaron Donald resonate more as a Pitt product, not just because his name and his face are all over that building, but because they've been able to have success with smaller defensive tackles. They've been able to build, it took a couple years, but Jalen Twyman came around and had a lot of success and made a lot of plays. And then following it up with Kalijah Cansey, who was even better than Twyman and ends up as an All-American and a potential first-round draft pick. That kind of thing does make an impression. I think they are able to sell it a little bit. I always go back and forth about how much it resonates when players make the NFL from a college. If a college coaching staff can say, we can get you to the NFL, I sometimes wonder how much impact that has, because all these guys believe they're going to the NFL anyway. They'll say, yeah, this guy can help me get there, but most of them believe they're already on that path to begin with. And, who knows how much college coaching they actually need to accomplish it. I think when you have Kalijah Cansey coming right after Jalen Twyman, and you have that sort of shadow of Aaron Donald looming over it all, there is a legacy there, and there is a lineage and an actual history. And it resonated with a guy like Francis Brew. I think it resonated with Jasir Whittington as well. And so you get these pretty good playmaking defensive tackles who are of a certain mold and would fit pretty well in Pitt's defense. So that was the story with Brew. Eric Ingwerson is a different guy from Nebraska, and I got a lot of questions about how he came onto Pitt's radar, how he showed up. We're still trying to connect with him for more of the backstory. Got a little bit of contact with him and got some feedback and reactions from him after his visit on Saturday, and when he committed. And then, like I say, he announced it yesterday. But, I mean, the first thing, you can look at his Rivals profile, you can look at his Twitter, you can look at his huddle, watch his video. He's big. He's a 6'7", 225-pound tight end defensive end. Last year, I think he caught 10 passes for 175 yards and like 3 touchdowns. Defense, he had 51 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. A productive athletic player. Don't know what kind of competition he's playing against. Don't know what the level of football around his area is. But size is size. And he can move pretty decent for a guy his size. Decent enough that you put him on the field, you throw jump balls to him, or you do whatever you need to do to get the ball. You can take advantage of matchups with a guy his size. Got the offer. He had 2 other offers when he came to Pitt on Saturday, Northern Illinois and Northern Iowa. He had a couple Power 5 schools interested. Minnesota was showing interest. Kansas was showing interest. A handful of other Group of 5 schools. But he gets the offer from Pitt, and from as far as I've been told, commits on the spot. Maybe, I don't want to say if he's more of a project or not. I mean, I think a guy his size, playing in Nebraska and sliding under the radar pretty good. I mean, I don't know if, I don't know if he's a project or not. But I think with that kind of size, you absolutely go for it. And, Pitt tight ends, go find as many guys as you can. Go find as many guys who fit as interesting, fit as many different profiles as you can find. They obviously got a hit with Gavin Bartholomew. Still waiting to find out what's going to happen with Jake Renda or a guy like Cole Mitchell. But they went out and found okay, this guy looks like he might be able to play. Let's bring him in. Let's just bring guys in and try and fill up the position room and hope, as you kind of shake up the shaker of Yahtzee, you roll the dice, you hope you get at least a couple 6s in there. Because tight end recruiting has been such a crapshoot. I don't even know if you could call it a crapshoot. Maybe an emphasis on one of those syllables over the course of the last 8 years. I think it's a tough, or 9 years. It's a tough position to recruit. I think fewer guys. I think there are fewer high-end tight ends across the country. I think guys who would be high-end tight ends either slim down and be big receivers, or they bulk up a little bit more in their impact defensive ends. I think there are probably a lot of really good defensive ends playing college football right now who could have been really good or great tight ends. But they chose to play defensive end because, well, there's probably more money there. And you look at even at the NFL, the tight end position is changing. More hybrid guys, more big receivers rather than traditional tight ends, and it becomes harder to find. Or I guess the other alternative, which I didn't mention, is guys go the Brian ONeill route, where they're big tight ends and they just grow into offensive tackles. Because again, there's more money to be made at offensive tackle. There's more money to be made at defensive end. And there probably is more money to be made as a big wide receiver than a lighter tight end. And so I think it's harder to get tight ends. Now, that doesn't mean that there's any reason why it should be as difficult as it's been for Pitt. And I think they've gotten good players over the years. I think Charles Reeves had a high ceiling, really good potential. Tyler Sear, I think, could have been really good. But neither one of those guys panned out for a variety of reasons. Gavin Bartholomew had a great freshman season and a not-so-great sophomore year. Jake Renda, don't really know. Seems like a good athlete, but we haven't seen him on the field at all. Cole Mitchell really impressed the coaching staff at a prospect camp the summer before he was going to he had pretty much finished high school, and he was going to reclassify to move into the next class down because he didn't have the college options he wanted. So he comes in June to a prospect camp, blows them away, really impresses the coaches at the camp with how physical he was at a non-pad camp. And they end up offering him a scholarship if he'll stay in his class and come to college that summer, which he does. But we haven't seen him on the field at all. So it's you can't even say it's been a mixed bag. It's been a bad bag of tight end recruiting outside of like 1 year of Gavin Bartholomew and 1 year of Lucas Krull. Matt Flanagan had a chance, but he got hurt and didn't really. I mean, none of these guys. I mean, we're not going to go through all the list of tight ends that Pitt has brought in under Pat Narduzzi, but none of it really has worked out. So you find a guy who's 6'7", can run a little bit. Worst case scenario, he grows into an offensive tackle, or he moves to defensive end. And maybe you're able to keep him at tight end and you throw him jump balls in the red zone. Either way, not a bad option. It'd be interesting to see if over the next few months, a guy like him or a guy like Francis Brew, for that matter, who I think had 4 or 5 Power 5 offers in addition to Pitt. It'd be interesting to see as we get through this evaluation period, which is kind of post-spring ball through the end of May, when college coaches can go out to high schools and see these recruits in person. It'd be interesting to see if those guys add some more scholarship offers. If their profile starts to climb a little bit. Certainly getting an offer from Pitt and being committed to Pitt, not just because it's Pitt, but because it's a Power 5 school, that immediately kind of raises an eyebrow, gets you to take another look. A school that might not have really been looking at Eric Ingwerson or Francis Brew might say, who's this kid who committed to Pitt? I saw Pitt got a commitment. Who is this? Did we look at that guy? Do we want to look at that guy? Do we want to try and make a move on that guy? That does happen. And we'll see if maybe some of that happens a little bit with these guys. But, 2 new commitments to the class. Brings the total to 6. First new commitments since, about a month ago. Month and a half, Taiyuas, the Central Catholic defensive end, a kid who always wanted to go to Pitt, got an offer from Pitt and committed not too long after. He was always excited to go to Pitt. He was a baseball player and football player at Central Catholic before he got hurt, and baseball career kind of came to an end on that one. But he was a good baseball player, a pitcher. You don't see a lot of defense. I don't think you see a lot of 6'3", 260-pound defensive ends who are also pitchers, but that was Taiyuas for sure. And I remember hearing that he was one of the next guys coming up in that 2024 class at Central Catholic, along with Anthony Specca and Cole Sullivan and Peter Gonzalez. There's some good players there, and Uas is right in that group. And he committed, like I say, shortly after getting an offer. They've got the running back from York, Pennsylvania, Jules Goff, who's a smaller back, a 5'9" kind of back, but he's got good speed, breakaway, ran for 1,600 yards and 30 touchdowns last season. I wouldn't be surprised if Pitt takes another back in this class, particularly if one wants to commit early. I wouldn't be surprised if they take him just because you never know who's going to stick. I don't think they're in a position to really tell too many guys no at this point. And I don't think they would tell too many guys no at this point. I don't know if they need 2 running backs in the class since they took 2 this year. But it's probably not the worst thing. Where they're sitting there right now where their running back room has 2 transfers in it. If you don't have to go that route, you'd prefer not to, although you're probably going to always end up going that route anyway. And then I mentioned, the 2 4-star guys, Day Farmer and Jasir Whittington. Farmer, a smaller receiver, but he's a playmaker, a really good receiver out of Cocoa, Florida, 4-star guy. And then Whittington, the defensive tackle, who he's I think Whittington's going to, and I mean, you could say this about a lot of recruits anymore in 2023. He's probably going to keep your blood pressure up a decent amount. He's been to Penn State multiple times since he committed to Pitt. If Penn State ever were to push on him, you wonder how that might impact things. I don't know how hard they're pushing for him at this point, but if they did, you wonder a little bit. But, ultimately he's committed to Pitt right now, and he seems to stay pretty steady committed to Pitt, even though he's going out and checking out other schools. But he's another one of these defensive tackles, another one of these playmaking guys, listed at 6'2", just like Brew is. Listed at a lighter weight than Brew, although he's probably heavier than what we have him listed at on Rivals.com. Another sort of smaller defensive tackle, and I mean, you can look at Pitt's defensive line across the board, and it's not a big group. I mean, there's decent size for some of the guys, but there's not a lot of bulk in there. And I'm not sure if that's the worst thing. I mean, look, you'd love to have Alabama's defensive line or an SEC defensive line where all the guys are, 6'4", 270, and they can run 4.5 40s or 4.6 40s, but it's not going to happen that way. I mean, you're not going to get that kind of thing. So, for a lot of schools, for schools like Pitt, not to be too reductive, but sometimes it comes down to a decision of, do you take size or speed? Or size or quickness, size or athleticism. And you're making that decision on both sides of the line. You're making that decision with offensive linemen and with defensive linemen. And I think Pitt, more often than not, has veered toward taking smaller, quicker linemen. I mean, they had the 1 year where they got Devin Danielson and Tyler Bentley and David Green, and Green is a little bit smaller and quicker, but Bentley and Danielson are bigger tackles. Beyond that, though, I mean, Elliott Donald is a little taller, but he's been moving between end and tackle. He came in as a tackle, but Pat Narduzzi said yesterday that he's been moving between end and tackle. Dayon Hayes is not as big as a Haba Baldonado or a Deslin Alexander. I mean, Nakai Johnson, Sam Okunlola, and these are good players. I mean, make no mistake about it. I think these guys are going to be really good on Pitt's defensive line this year, but they're not the biggest linemen. But Pitt's not looking for size as the number one objective. They're looking for guys who can make plays, and sometimes that's going to be the smaller, quicker guys. And I think Whittington and Brew both fit that mold to varying degrees and in different ways. So 6 commitments so far, pretty good start to the class. 6 commitments by the middle of March. That's got to be some kind of record. I'd like to look back and check, but it gets so tough anymore with decommitments and things like that I don't think I need to check. I'm pretty sure they've never had 6 commitments by the middle of March. But with decommitments and things like that, it's hard to find the records on exactly what, they might have had 4 by March, but they lost 2. And so only, when you look at the commitment list with the commitment dates, there are only 2 guys listed in there who were committed before the middle of March. But this is a big group so far, a good group so far. I would expect them to be able to take a decent-sized class. And, as they continue having success on the field, I think they're going to be able to continue recruiting well, and that's something we'll definitely talk about over the course of the next few months, heading into June when everything gets wild and crazy on the June official visit weekend. So that's something, of course, to look forward to. But we wanted to get a quick update, bring things up to date on the 2024 recruiting class. That's where it stands right now, and we'll see where it goes from there. Pitt's had a bunch of recruits visit campus so far just over the last week of spring practices, and there'll be even more, throughout the rest of this week and over the next few weeks leading into the spring game in mid-April. So we'll have that to look forward to, and definitely we will talk about it here and on Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Go check out the site, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Like this video while you're here and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Remember, we'll be live tonight for the Panther-Lair show at 8:30 p.m. right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then we'll be back again tomorrow morning for another Morning Pitt. So thanks for tuning into this one. Hope you've had a great week so far. We're at the midpoint of the week. Have a great Wednesday. We'll talk to you tonight on the live stream, and we'll be back in the morning for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.